We are on John chapter 10. You can turn your Bibles there if you have those with you. And before we begin our look at the Lord's Holy Scripture, let's again go to Him in prayer. Father, we acknowledge our weakness. We acknowledge our inability to sometimes understand your word, and so we ask for your help. You say in James 1:5 that if anyone is lacking wisdom in your word, that all they have to do is come to you and ask for it, and you will give in abundance. And so that's what we do. We ask that you would bless us with abundant knowledge of your word, that you'd help us to grow in your word, that each of us would be reached by your word today, and that not only would it reach our hearts and our minds, but Lord, that it would work all its way to our feet and our hands and our lips so that we put it into practice, what we hear from your holy word today. Be with us as we study your word. Help it to convict us, encourage us, strengthen us, and help us to live lives that are pleasing to you. For it is in Jesus' holy name we pray and thank you. Amen. John 10, the last song we played today was Shepherd, and this is the chapter where Jesus describes himself as the Good Shepherd. He is the Good Shepherd, and there's a contrast between a good shepherd and a bad shepherd, and that's what we see here in chapter 10 of John. Jesus here flows, this Good Shepherd context comes right as Jesus continues to talk to the very same people he was talking to in John 9. So we take the same kind of location contrast, moves right into John 10. And so this is Jesus directly bringing up the fact that Israel is being led by false shepherds. They are drawing the people away from the true knowledge of God and from God's kingdom. So here, Jesus is going to declare in this chapter that he is the Good Shepherd, one who was appointed by God the Father. And he's going to contrast himself as the Good Shepherd opposed to those leaders in Israel that were leading the people away. They were the bad or false shepherds. He is the true and legitimate shepherd who enters in the way that is proper and prepared. As we start in verse 1 of chapter 10 in the Gospel of John, it says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep." I want to stop there because this is just highlighting the conflict and the contrast between a true shepherd and a false shepherd. The religious leaders of the day here had shown themselves to be cruel, unhelpful, false. Jesus feels as though he has to point this out. And remember, this is a continuation of the previous chapter. So he says, "He who does not enter by the sheepfold into the sheepfold by the door, but comes in some other way, is a thief and a robber." You have all kinds of people who were leading the people of Israel at this time, whether it was political or spiritual, and they were all looking to be shepherds, so to speak, of the people. And Jesus here is pointing out that not everyone who calls themselves a shepherd is a true shepherd. Not everyone who claims the title of shepherd is a true shepherd. Some are thieves and robbers. So that should bring to our attention, well, that's important. I should make sure that I know the difference because I don't want to have my shepherd be a thief or a robber. I want a good shepherd. One mark of whether or not someone is a good shepherd or a false bad shepherd is how they enter in amongst the sheep. So how do they gain entry among the sheep is a good identifier of whether or not it is a good shepherd or a bad shepherd. The idea here is that there is a door, there is a proper way to gain entry into the sheepfold. Not everyone who comes in and stands among the sheep, though, has come in that way. Some have come in a different way, a way that God has not said is okay. There's only one way, and God has identified that way. So to come into his sheepfold any other way is to be disobeying God, the very God you say you're serving and leading people in the worship and growing in knowledge of. But how can you do that if you're encouraging people by doing things the wrong way in the very first place? You had religious people of the day, the leaders of the day, of Jesus' day. They had their place among God's people, the sheep spoken of here, although personal and political connections were probably there too. But they were not proper shepherds. They didn't enter in the way that God wanted them to, commanded it to be. He who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. A true shepherd comes in the legitimate, designed way that God has prescribed in His Word. And they come through a passion that God has put into their very hearts, a calling, an irrevocable calling that was put into their hearts, a love, a calling, a care, a desire for sacrificial sacrifice and service, not to themselves, but to everyone else, and to most of all, the Lord. God always intended that. The shepherd is a servant, not to be served, but to serve. God always intended that His people, His true sheep, God always intended that they would be led, that they would be fed, and that they would be protected by those who came in God's intended way, through the door. There is no other legitimate way. You can't say that I'm a good shepherd, but I chose to come by climbing over the fence, and I still want to lead, care, feed. No, you have already given away the ghost. You've already shown your cards. If you truly loved and cared about God and what God said, you would do things His intended way, right? If God says that this is the way I want you to play the game, and if you love me and serve me and are true to me, you will play the game by my rules. And the very first thing you do is you go out and you tell your friends, oh, I love God with all my heart, and I want to serve Him. Well, what are you going to do? I'm going to play the game. Okay. Well, how are you going to do it? Oh, however I want. Do you see how that doesn't make sense? Yet there are many false shepherds that are amongst the flocks that do that very thing. They're doing things their way instead of God's intended, legitimate way. The door is there for a reason. Some might climb over the outside walls, but God has those walls there and the door there for a reason, to protect the flock, to make sure that only those who are legitimate have entry into the flock. That's what you would do if you had a bunch of sheep, wouldn't you? You would protect them by building a fence around them or a wall around them, and you would limit access to only people that you knew were going to take care of your sheep because you care for your sheep. So you would limit the access to the people who had availability to get into your sheep, right? You'd be like, oh, I trust you. Here's a key to the door. I trust you as well. Here's a key to the door. And then some fox dressed up in human clothes comes walking up and is like, hey, I'll take a key. You wouldn't give him a key because you don't trust him, right? So then the fox looks for another way to get into the sheepfold. Do you see the idea here? The sheep are kept traditionally in a pen which had a gate. So imagine a sheep pen with a gate, and the sheep would enter in and leave through that gate or that door. So the shepherd is a sort of gatekeeper or doorkeeper. To gain access to the sheep, the vulnerable sheep, you have to get through the shepherd. And for the sheep to go out to pasture, they had to get through the shepherd. He was a line of defense. The shepherd entered through that same gate. He didn't need to climb over the walls because he was legitimately meant to be there. But someone who's only interested in stealing or eating or taking the sheep would choose another way, because they're not going to try and go through the shepherd. They're not going to go through the legitimate door. No. Because that's not their interest. They don't want what they're trying to do to be noticed and seen. Instead, they do it their own way, climb over the wall, find another way in. It's the same with pastors. You are either called by God and then equipped to that calling, or you yourself just wanted to do it. And by golly, you'll find a way in, by hook or by crook, whether God wanted you to do that or not. And there are plenty of instances within the New Testament and with Paul's letters to Timothy and Peter's letter that gives us firm indications of what the qualifications of shepherds are. But those are cast aside, almost secondary, not even given a care in nowadays church. If you don't enter through the gate, through the great shepherd, the great doorkeeper who is Jesus Christ, into your pastoral office, then you are a thief and a robber. Because a thief and a robber enters in not through Christ, but through another way, and for a different purpose, for ambition, for greed, to be in control, for fame, to be distinguished from the crowd, to promote their own interests. Whoever enters by any other means than the one means that God has provided into the sheepfold is a thief and a robber. They don't deserve any better name. Don't give them a way out. Don't sit there and say, well, yeah, but they have it really well in their, they're well intended in their heart. Their motives are no, they're not. No, they're not. God, you wouldn't say that. Cain and Abel, they both brought God an offering, right? Why was God happy with one and not happy with the other? They both brought an offering. They're both acknowledging God as God, and they're both bringing an offering. Why was God happy with one and mad at the other? Because one did it the way he said, and the other one did it whatever way he darn well pleased. God has not changed. He's immutable. It's the same thing today. Verse 3 in John 10. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he's brought out all of his own, he goes before them. Shepherd's a leader. He goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. This spiritual picture of, to him the doorkeeper opens. Well, Jesus spoke of here, the door for the sheep pen had a doorkeeper, one who watches who comes in and who comes out, whether it's the shepherd himself or someone else. In towns of that time, many flocks were kept in a common area, and you had a doorkeeper that oversaw everything, regulated which shepherds brought in which flocks and which ones left. That's why it's important to have historical context. So when you're reading this, you're like, okay, what would Jesus have been talking about at this time? That's what he's talking about. And he mentions how he calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out. So one of those shepherds comes to that big gathering pen, and he calls his sheep by name, and they recognize that, and they come to him. The shepherd calls the sheep by name, showing that he has a personal connection with them. He's calling the sheep by name. He's not just saying, hey, any old sheep, come on, any old sheep. Nope, he's saying, Gertrude, Susan, Michael, get over here. And the sheep go, whoop, I know that voice. And they come running. The shepherd leads them. He provides direction. He provides leadership, protection, feeding, or knowledge. What we're doing right now is feeding. He calls his own sheep by name. He calls each and every sheep by its own special name. This is what Jesus does. He calls out to his flock individually by name. Each and every one of us being called by Christ and being given ears that hear, hearing that call of our Master and our Good Shepherd. Somehow we're already sheep of his flock because we recognize when he calls. You see? We already are sheep of his flock. He has already predetermined who he was going to save. So when he calls out to you, he's already given you ears to hear. And now you respond because somehow you know that he's your shepherd. And you're his sheep. Jesus did this while his earthly ministry was going on. Did he not call out Peter, James, John, Mary Magdalene? He called out to them just like a shepherd would call out to his sheep. In larger town circumstances where you had this large pen of sheep and you had that door with a doorkeeper, you would have an under shepherd that would be hired, and they would recognize the true shepherd of the flocks when they came to pick up the flocks. They would open the gate for this true shepherd, But they would not open the gate for a false shepherd. That's why the false shepherds had to find some other way. They didn't have a true motive, so that's why they're trying to break in, crawl over the fence, sneak in. That's why they're thieves and robbers and crooks. The under shepherd would assist the shepherd in caring for the flock, especially guarding them at night. In Near Eastern shepherdry, they would use sometimes their own special call, which their own sheep would recognize. You're probably all expecting me to do some kind of funny call right now. I'm going to resist the urge.
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
I'm going to resist the urge. I want to keep you on your toes. I'm not always, that's my first gut instinct was to do that. And I'm like, no, I'm going to keep you on your toes. I'm not going to do that. But he calls his own sheep by name. The point is that the sheep of that shepherd, a true shepherd, recognize him, recognize his voice, recognize his call, his unique call. And he leads them out. He goes in front of the sheep. He leads. They follow him from pasture to pasture, for they know his voice. They know his voice. They can discern the difference. Two men standing there. One's the true shepherd, one's not. Gertrude, Gertrude, right? They both call out Gertrude. But Gertrude knows and can discern the true voice of her true shepherd and would go only to him. Jesus used this illustration of being amongst the sheep and what those who seek to serve among the sheep should focus upon. Again, this is all about contrasting Jesus as the good shepherd and all these false religious leaders of his day as false shepherds, bad shepherds. John 10, verse 7. So again, Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am." There's that I am statement again. I am. He is very clearly linking himself to the statement in Exodus 3, where God is in the burning bush. I am that I am. This is Jesus linking himself equal with God the Father. I am. I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. This is a way of Christ insisting that he is God. I am. I am. And God, through me, that is the only way of being saved and having eternal life. He didn't give a bunch of options here. He says he is the door. Anybody who enters by me will be saved. Anybody who goes any other route will find only destruction. He's making a very strong contrast here. He is the only source of knowledge and protection. He's the only source of security for the sheep. He says, I am the door of the sheep. This is another picture of sheep farming in Jesus' time. There's only one entrance into a sheep pen. There's not 60. There's only one. And that was the only door for that sheep to get in there when they're out in the fields and stuff is the shepherd himself. He would lay his body across the entrance to make sure that no sheep ran out foolishly and that no wolf or no thief would come in, because to get in, you'd have to crawl over his body. What a beautiful illustration that is. If you think of yourself as a sheep in the protected pasture of the Lord, that it's Jesus himself whose body has been laid out across that door, keeping the enemy out and keeping you in his grace. It's a beautiful picture. Putting his life on the line, which is exactly what he did, isn't it? It's exactly what he did. He is the door. He is the gate. He leads them out of the sheepfold. He was the one who led them into it. He's the one who leads them out of it. He takes care of them. He protects them. He feeds them. He takes care of every one of their needs. He says, all who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, deceivers, tricksters. Robber can mean violence and destruction as well. Not just a peaceful robbery. There's aggravated robberies. These take away life, but Jesus gives life. robbers, thieves, they take, they destroy. Jesus, the true shepherd, well, he does the opposite. He gives life. Completely the opposite. Not only does he give life, he gives it abundantly. Abundantly. And by that, I do not mean what a lot of confused believers think that means. It doesn't mean, oh, God gives you life and he gives it to you abundantly through Jesus Christ. Therefore, you can have 4 yachts instead of 2. You can have a 3,000 square foot house instead of a 900 square foot shack. Oh, because God gives life abundantly. No. This is obviously not talking in that context. Again, clear everything up with context, context, context. Don't just pluck verses out of the Bible. Read it in the full context, and you see very clearly that Jesus is speaking in spiritual terms. And we all know for a fact that Jesus is very giving and is very liberal with his blessings with spiritual abundance. That's what that's talking about here. And in contrast to Jesus and his spiritual abundance as the good and true shepherd, he contrasts that with the bad and false shepherds who aren't interested in the welfare of the sheep. They are thieves, robbers, greedy, destructive. And if you take that, Jesus is talking spiritually. He's not talking physically about the false pastors and the false shepherds. He's also talking spiritually about them. A false shepherd, spiritually speaking, is a thief, a robber, full of destruction. There is no abundant life there at all, just the opposite. And they don't care about you. So if Jesus is speaking spiritually about himself as the good shepherd, I want you to see that Jesus is also talking spiritually about the bad shepherds. Don't give them a pass. Oh, well, their heart's in the right place. This isn't a Hallmark movie. This is eternal murder we're talking about. He says, all that have come before, basically to be those religious leaders who have all come before Jesus, the ones who had been, all the false shepherds that had been trying to lead Israel, were all tools in Satan's hand. Remember, he told them that you're not sons of Abraham. If you were sons of Abraham, you would do as Abraham did and put your faith in God the Father. No. By your actions, you're showing that you're children of Satan. Remember that? The Pharisees are blind leaders, bogus shepherds. And these are the ones that fall underneath John 10:8, thieves and robbers. The same is true today. There is a good shepherd and his under-shepherds, and then there are a bunch of bad shepherds who are thieves and robbers, bogus shepherds. Jesus didn't say there were thieves and robbers. He says there are thieves and robbers. Until he returns, there always will be. We must distinguish them. But the sheep do not hear them. God's true sheep don't listen to false, bad shepherds. Jesus says his sheep are evident because they will not hear, meaning follow after. They won't follow after the voice of a thief or a robber who claims to be a shepherd but is really bogus. His true sheep won't listen to him, just like I said with the Gertrude example, right? True shepherd, Gertrude. Gertrude, come running. False shepherd Gertrude won't come running because Gertrude can distinguish the voice of her true shepherd and a false one. Just taking authority over someone from a position that you yourself have been given or have taken does not give you authority over the people of God. I don't have any authority over you. I don't have any authority over you. I have zero authority over you. You know who has authority over you? God. And you know how God has revealed what he wants you to do and what he wants you to not do? His word. It's his word that has the authority, not the pastor. The pastor's job is to relate what God has already said, not to make up stuff or to give you what they say. No, just what God has said. Thus saith the Lord, chapter and verse. That's it. The authority is in God's word, not in the person preaching it to you. Jesus describes the settled, satisfied life enjoyed by his sheep. They'll be saved. They'll go in and out. They'll find pasture. Sounds good. They'll live life abundantly. Sounds good. These are the blessings for the sheep that follow the true shepherd, who is Jesus Christ. Because he is a good shepherd. He exercises perfect shepherdly care to his sheep. There is a very high standard to be considered a shepherd of Christ's flocks. I could go on. This is one of my hot button issues. I could go on and on about this. One of the things that drives me the buggiest is the fact that you have people who claim to be pastors and, they just show an image on a screen every week, and that's not your pastor. That's not a shepherd. What good would it be to have a shepherd's flock in a pen, and instead of the body of the shepherd being stretched across the door, you put an image? You take what do you call those things? I can't think of the name of it. Projector. And you project an image of a shepherd laying across the doorway, right? Well, what good's that going to do? Nothing. It's the same with these churches that have multi-campuses, but their pastors flung up on the screen in this image. That's no pastor. That's no shepherd. Don't you see that it doesn't matter how many sheep you have in your pasture. It's how healthy are they. And you can't tell. Sheep have wool fur. Never seen a furry sheep. Sheep have wool, right? And that wool makes it, they all look the same. But you can have sheep that aren't eating, that are sick, that are dying, but you wouldn't know it if you don't go up and put your hands on them and feel through the wool and see their true physical, i.e. spiritual condition, which you can't do if you're not in the trenches with them. You have to be there with them. What good does it have? What good is it to have 1,500 sheep and, 3/4 of them are walking around hitting their head into a post because they're mentally ill, or they're physically ill and they're spiritually ill? What good is that? Jesus describes what it's like to be a sheep, a true sheep with a true shepherd. He says they'll be settled, satisfied, they'll have a life enjoyed, they're going to have life abundant. This isn't, your bank account will always have money in it. Your car will never have a dead battery. Everybody else's cars might be frosted on a cold morning. Yours is going to be completely defrosted without you ever starting. Your life is just going to be charmed and great. It's not what he's saying. Spiritually. It's all spiritually. And this is as you go in and as you go out. All the circle of life. No matter what you're doing, you will have that shepherdly care of Jesus Christ. And to the same degree, underneath him, the under-shepherdly care of a true pastor, a true shepherd. To go in and out is a common Old Testament expression of life, daily life, to come and go. You ever hear somebody say, "May God bless you in your comings and your goings"? That's the same thing as saying, "May God bless your daily life in everything that you're doing." Same idea here. Jesus says, "I have come." He's talking about himself. "I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly." He's talking about his sheep. He's contrasting himself, his kind of care, compared to false shepherds' care. And imagine he's saying this directly to these false shepherds that are right in front of him. He didn't go home and write a blog about it. He didn't make a snarky meme. He didn't do anything. No, he directly was saying this to them as they're standing there with him. They came to do the opposite. They came to steal, to kill. They came to use. Jesus comes to bring life. Powerful contrast. And abundant life. Abundant doesn't mean especially long. Abundant doesn't mean easy and comfortable. Abundant life is a life of contentment in Jesus Christ. And those of you who are mature believers who have walked with him for a while know what I mean by that. Abundance means a surplus. That you always have enough. You have a surplus of contentment. A contented life. God is able to supply your every need, whether it be an emergency or in your comings and your goings in your everyday life. There's a level of contentment and abundance in that. A peace that passes all understanding in that. verse 11 in John 10. Here's another I am statement. Jesus is not hiding the fact that he is putting himself on equal terms with the Father. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Certainly, Jesus showed that. He wasn't just talking flowery statements. He wasn't just looking to try and find a statement that would look good on a t-shirt. He shows this statement to be true in his substitutionary atonement on the cross. He would lay down his life for his sheep, and he did. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, verse 12. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming, and he leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand flees because he is a hired hand, and he cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. Again, he says, I lay down my life for the sheep. He says it so plainly, I am the good shepherd. There's no mistaking what he means. He fulfills the idealment of a true and good shepherd. He announces himself as the good shepherd. He's the enemy to the thief and the robber. He's the enemy. He knows that the thief and the robber do not have the best interests of the sheep at mind. He does. So the thief and the robber is the enemy of the good shepherd. Jesus is a good shepherd, a remarkable shepherd. He takes risks for the sheep. That's what a good shepherd does. Lays down his life for the sheep. It's rare to find someone who would lay down their life for a friend or sheep. Jesus does it. He gives his life. The hired hand, however, sees the wolf coming and flees. This is a representation of the religious leaders that Jesus is contrasting himself with. They perform their duties, but they are not sacrificial in their care. And their duties are not for the good of the sheep, it's for their own selfish good. They're doing it because they're getting paid. They're getting something from it. They're not just doing it because they have a sacrificial love for the sheep. They stand in stark contrast to Jesus, who lays his life down for the sheep. The hired hand sees the wolf coming. They're out of there. They know that the sheep are in danger, but they don't care. They're looking out for number one. So this underling, they see a wolf coming. They know what that means. So then the question becomes, what will they do? How do they act? This is a litmus test. You can do the same litmus test with shepherds today. The flock, the true flock of Christ, is under attack. How do they respond? You see a wolf coming towards your flock, what do? Do they turn tail and run? Or do they grab the staff and rod and run out to defend the sheep? It's not that hard to be able to tell the difference between a good shepherd and a bad shepherd, a true shepherd and a false shepherd. Jesus says you'll know them by their fruit. You'll know them by what they do. You'll know them by the fruit of what they teach. The purpose of this wolf are the same as the thief in John verse 10. It is an enemy of the sheep. Therefore, the wolf is the enemy of the shepherd. Anything that's a threat to the sheep is an enemy of the shepherd, whether it be the thief, the robber, or the wolf. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. A hireling or a bad shepherd will not defend the sheep. They look at the sheep as a means to an end. They exist for my benefit. This job is great and all, it pays well, but they kind of exist for my benefit. And it doesn't benefit me to give my life for the sheep. Right? But a good shepherd lives and dies for the sheep. The good shepherd sacrifices for the sheep. Jesus being the great shepherd and the greatest example of this. The good shepherd knows his sheep. He has an intimate relationship with them. Knows them by name. He cares about them. I mean, genuinely cares. Some people have the image of Christ and God that he's just some regal person up on a throne with a giant scepter, right? And he doesn't really care for you all that much. He doesn't really know you all that much. I mean, he knows you. If he could list off everything about you, but he doesn't really know you. No, this speaks of a shepherd who knows his sheep by name and who cares for them sacrificially so much that he's willing to give his life for them. That's Jesus. For you and me. He knows he knows them. My sheep know me, and I know them, Jesus says. He knows you better than you know yourself. He's the most intimate friend and father. The good sheep is known, or the good shepherd is known by the sheep. There's a mutual knowledge. Jesus knows the sheep, and the sheep know Jesus. The good shepherd knows the sheep, and the sheep know the good shepherd. The faithful pastor, as an under-shepherd, displays those same characteristics as the great shepherd, Jesus Christ. You will sacrifice for the sheep. You know the sheep. You get to know them. Oh, hi, pastor. Oh, hi. Ashley? I've been coming to this church for 20 years. You don't know my name? Shame. Shame. This is what I point to other pastors. You don't know your sheep? How then can you call yourself a good shepherd? And it's not just a shepherd of sheep, it's the bride of Christ. I love my wife. If someone came and hurt my wife, you would have to deal with me severely. Now imagine Christ and how he feels about his bride, the church. People aren't looking at it the right way. Bad shepherds, most of all, are going to hear the most terrible things when they stand before the Lord at judgment. A good shepherd sacrifices for the sheep, knows the sheep, and is known by them. He leads, they see his example, they see his passion, they see his life being built on a foundation of faith and trust in God and his word. He will be a shepherd, not a hireling. A hireling does not care for the sheep. They're doing it for the money. A hireling can never hope to show those qualities and characteristics that I mentioned. The qualities and characteristics that Jesus himself highlights so perfectly. A hireling will never be able to meet those characteristics or show any of them. But a true shepherd will show these characteristics. Spurgeon said this, "How many are there to whom we have reason to fear that they must be hirelings? Because when they see false doctrine, when they see error abroad, they do not oppose it. They are willing to put up with anything for the sake of peace and quietness." The title pastor translates in ancient Greek to the same word used for shepherd. It is a title that is rightfully earned. It shouldn't be a title that is assumed. All the qualifications of shepherd or pastor must be met. For the only way to meet those qualifications is by the grace of God and his equipping of that said man. And if he does not equip that said man, it is obvious that that said man has not been called, and therefore is just a hireling. He says, "As the Father knows me, even I know the Father." The work of Jesus as the Good Shepherd is rooted in his relationship with the Father. And then he becomes the mediator between us and the Father. What a good shepherd he is. Verse 16. Now he speaks of other sheep. He says, "And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also. And they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd." When he says, "Other sheep I have which are not of this fold," these are the Gentile believers. Us. The Gentile believers, those who are not of the fold of Israel. Jesus says he must bring these sheep also, and that these sheep would hear his voice. Yes. Gentiles will hear the voice of Jesus just like Israelites will. and become part of his church and his bride. So Jesus' sacrificial death, his willingness to lay down his life for the sheep, is not just for the Israelites who are going to come to believe in him. It's also for the Gentiles who will come and believe in him. It's for everybody who will come and believe in him, Jew or non-Jew alike. Sometimes a shepherd might separate his sheep for a while to care for them better, but eventually he brings them all together into one flock. Unity comes from the fact that not all the sheep are forced into one fold, but they all hear, answer, and respond to the same one shepherd's voice. You don't, get in that fold. No, they willingly come. They willingly come because they hear and obey the voice of the shepherd. That means our unity is in the shepherd, Christ. Verse 17. Jesus now claims to have power over life and death. He says, "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me." I love that statement. If you ever thought for a moment that, mankind overcame Jesus just for a moment, or, the demonic forces of Satan overcame Jesus just for a moment. Nope. Jesus says it very clearly. "For this reason the Father loves me. I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord." I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. The Father saw the beauty and the self-sacrifice in God the Son, and he acknowledges it. And Jesus says, "I have the power to lay down my life and to take it up again." You can say in that sense that Jesus Christ and God the Father and God the Spirit, they all have the power to raise from the dead. And Jesus is making it clear that he had the power to lay his life down and he had the power to pick it back up again. None of us can say that. Good to know that our shepherd is the only one who can do that. Anyone can lay down their life. Only Jesus can pick it back up again. And I love that about him. I love everything about him that is unique to him and him alone. I love that stuff. Jesus has the power to take up his own life. And that shows his unique relationship with God the Father. It's another evidence that he is who he says that he is God, that he is one with God the Father. He's also saying this when he says, I lay down my life. No one takes it from me. I choose to lay it down, and I will choose to pick it back up again. That is also his way of saying that his sacrificial death is not the end. Right? If the apostles would have remembered back to that moment, they would have said, well, wait, he's dead, but didn't he say he was going to pick his life back up again? The sacrificial death of the great shepherd was not the end. His resurrection came as a demonstration that he was God, that God was pleased with him, and that everything he said, if God's pleased with him, that means he never lied, and that means everything he said was true, resulting in his glorification and our salvation. He says, "This command I have received from my Father." He's saying, my death is completely voluntary, but it was not some kind of a off-the-cuff decision, right? He wasn't suicidal. He's saying, I'm doing this because my Father has asked me to do this. It's part of his plan to submit to the Father, something that we should all be doing. Submit to the Father. Submit to the Father, which means death, but through that death, life and victory. I think we'll close there for today. Let's pray. Father, you are your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, is the Good Shepherd. I am woefully aware of how insufficient I am to be an under-shepherd of yours, but I see your work nonetheless in the lives of all your people. And so I am grateful that you are God and I am not. I'm grateful that you're the good shepherd, that no one can steal from your flock or take from your flock or harm your flock, that you will always keep us perfectly safe, and that you will equip your flock with good under-shepherds who will be self-sacrificing in their love for your flock because of their love for you. Help us, Lord. Help us, Lord, to live lives that are pleasing to you. Help us to submit to your will, like Jesus did so well, even unto death. Help us to submit to your will, too, in our everyday lives, so that we might be called children of God, that our lives will reflect a change from sinfulness to righteousness. Lord, we just thank you for being the good shepherd that you are. And we enjoy your good pasture, and we enjoy life more abundantly because of the contentment we can have in you and the promises that we know will be fulfilled in the future when we get to be with you forever and ever and ever in a new heavens and a new earth. We thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen.